Chapter 81 Elective Courses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Lantern Festival buzz had faded, leaving the little wizards at Hogwarts feeling a bit bored. It was a definite come-down from the excitement beforehand. Adam couldn't really do much about it. He couldn't exactly take them to celebrate Memorial Day and honor their ancestors in the middle of Hogwarts, right? At least he could still sell those youth dumplings as usual. In the midst of this blah atmosphere, the Easter holiday finally arrived, and with it, the chance for second-year wizards to pick their electives for the next year. Ugh, so many choices, how am I supposed to decide? Cologne munched on an Adam's Easter egg, looking stressed as he stared at the course selection list: divination, arithmancy, care of magical creatures, ancient runes, and Muggle studies. In theory, each student needed to choose at least 2 subjects to earn enough points. If the schedules didn't conflict, they could take even more. Divination seems like a total crapshoot. Maybe I should go with care of magical creatures. I think I'm pretty good with those. What about Muggle studies? If I get stuck, I can always ask Bernard. Cologne nodded to himself, already picturing checking off care of magical creatures and Muggle studies. I wouldn't recommend Muggle studies. Adam said while eating an Easter egg. He'd turned the inside of his Easter eggs into little planet-shaped cups, with cool paintings on the outside. They were a huge hit at Hogwarts, and some of the younger wizards were even buying them for their parents. Trust me, anything wizards write about Muggles is probably nothing like the real thing. Adam ticked off the 4 subjects except Muggle studies. And divination? Word on the street is it's a joke. Professor Trelawney hands out good grades to anyone who can predict their own gruesome demise. Whoa, Cologne's eyes widened. This wasn't what he'd imagined at all. Isn't the divination test about making accurate predictions? How are they supposed to judge that? It's divination, for crying out loud. Some prophecies come true instantly, others take decades. Besides, real divination talent is rare. The class is supposed to find those few gifted people. They can't fail everyone else, right? I guess that makes sense. Uther, who'd walked up behind Adam, glanced at Adam's course selection list and blinked. Adam, why are you picking 4 courses? What if the classes overlap? The rules don't say I can't pick 4, right? I'm sure Hogwarts will figure it out. Adam grinned and pocketed his form. He'd been eyeing that time turner for ages. Time magic was incredibly complex. He tried studying it with the time card and the ruthless card, but it hadn't worked. He hoped the wizarding time turner would let him experience and study time magic from another angle. If he could master time magic and use the sorcerer's stone as a power source, Adam would be practically invincible. Plus, the time rules in this world were a bit weird. Only things you witnessed with your own eyes were set in stone. Changing the past could actually change the future. There were too many people whose deaths Adam hadn't seen firsthand. They hadn't shown any signs of being in danger over the years, but who knew for sure if they were safe? Oblivious to Adam's ambitions, the other roommates were still struggling with their course choices. After a long time, Bernard chose the same courses as Cologne. Divination will be easy, plus I'm kinda interested in magical creatures. And I could use a pet. After checking off his choices, Bernard high-fived Cologne. Uther swapped care of magical creatures for ancient runes. Considering that his strength was way beyond normal, Eugene dropped care of magical creatures after a bit of hemming and hawing and picked the same courses as Uther. Wait, nobody's going for 3 electives? Adam asked, looking at the final forms. Who'd want to take 4 electives? Faced with his roommate's blank stares, Adam shrugged. Divination was supposed to be a piece of cake. Arithmancy was just math, right? It couldn't be harder than college calculus. If it wasn't actually magical, it was probably just basic probability theory. He'd taken that course. For care of magical creatures, he had the AI brand Halo to protect him, and he'd already been teaching himself ancient runes using Nico Flammel's notes. For electives, no sweat. You should really pick subjects that line up with what you want to do later, so your diploma looks good. Adam said, then remembered what his friends were planning to do. Uther was going to be the Minister of Magic of Egypt, Cologne would inherit the family business. Hogsmeade rare birds and beasts had been around for generations. The family connections and steady supply and demand meant Cologne could slide into it without making any changes. Eugene and Bernard might be a little uncertain. Adam and the others looked at them curiously. I'm not sure what I want to do, maybe write a book at home. Or start a business. My family's got enough money for me to blow through for a lifetime, so I've got time to figure it out. Eugene said vaguely. Yeah, I want to stick around in the wizarding world, but I don't really know enough about it to plan my career. Bernard sounded unsure, so he looked at his course selections one more time. So, Adam, why did you pick these four? What does it have to do with your shop? Cologne asked, suddenly sounding worried. You're not going to change your mind about opening it, right? They all stared at Adam. No way. I'm definitely opening a restaurant in Hogsmeade, and I'll come to you to buy stuff when I do. Adam reassured Cologne. But you're taking 4 electives. You're even going to have time and energy to open a store? Eugene asked, and Adam froze. He had a point. The courses wouldn't be hard, but they would take up time. And he still had to do homework. He couldn't write on parchment with a shorthand quill pen while running a restaurant, could he? That would be a drag. He'd already thought about it, but he hadn't expected to put it into practice so soon. Bernard, Eugene, since you guys aren't sure what you want to do. Adam looked at them. How about you guys work for me as the acting store managers? Chapter 82 Small Business, Senior Newt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Acting store manager. Yeah, acting store manager. Adam nodded. You guys would run the store for me. I'd supply the merchandise, and you could set the hours, as long as they're fairly consistent, twice a week, at least 4 hours each time, or until everything's sold. So, basically, you want us to help you run the store, right? No sweat. Bernard said, and Eugene nodded in agreement. Hold your horses, I'm not done yet. The pay is 200 gold galleons a month. 200 gold galleons. Eugene and Bernard looked surprised. Isn't that a little much? Bernard asked. He wasn't turning down the money, it wasn't just a one-time favor, but it still seemed crazy that a part-time gig for 8 hours a week paid almost half of what his parents made. Bernard did a quick conversion to pounds, but Eugene had a better sense of the income levels in the wizarding world. While prices in the wizarding world were steep, textbooks were basically priced in galleons, and food was expensive. Basic needs didn't cost that much, so most wizards didn't actually make a ton of money. Considering Dobby's 10 galleon weekly salary at Hogwarts in the books was probably the bare minimum, the average full-time wizard probably earned between 100 and 300 galleons a month, and Adam was offering them 200 gold galleons. Too much. Nah. I need you to do more than just ring people up. There's a lot involved. I've thought this through. Adam assured them that the generous offer wasn't just because they were friends. Bernard and Eugene considered it and accepted. There was no reason to say no to that kind of money, and they weren't exactly busy. They mostly played games, watched Quidditch, and occasionally cracked open a book. When the Black Lake wasn't frozen, Eugene would fish, and that was about it. Wow, 200 gold galleons a month, I'm a little jealous, Cologne admitted, and Adam looked at him. If you're interested, you're welcome to join. Cologne and Uther wouldn't be his acting store managers after graduation, but Adam was fine with them gaining some experience. 200 gold galleons a month was chump change. Really? Uther raised an eyebrow. Adam waved his hand. The more, the merrier. How much do you even make in a month? Desserts, if Adam wanted, were practically free to make, and the demand was endless. The business had even spread to relatives of Hogwarts students who weren't at school. The kids would buy desserts that traveled well and send them by owl. On top of that, Adam would occasionally organize little promotions to boost sales, plus the Hogwarts banquet orders. Adam smiled slightly. It's just a little something, a drop in the bucket, really. The next day, Adam planned to show the 4 interns the ropes of store management, but an owl flew through the open dorm door. Adam had made his own breakfast that morning, so the owl had to wait outside the door. Adam glanced at the envelope and his eyes lit up. It was a letter from Newt. Because of the portrait, there were limitations. Even if there was a connection, Adam couldn't use it to talk to Newt directly. So, Adam had gotten Newt's address through the portrait and sent a letter. He hadn't expected a response so quickly. Is something up? We're not in a rush. You'll be busy next year anyway, we've got plenty of time, Bernard said. Despite the generous pay, the acting store manager thing wasn't a huge deal. It was mostly about helping Adam free up some time. Well, let's do it another day. Newt wrote back. Adam replied. Newt. Newt? Cologne's eyes widened. Newt Scamander, the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them guy. My whole family are huge fans. Eugene looked at Adam, equally excited. Yep, that's the one. Gotta see what he said. The lesson was cancelled. Uther and Bernard went out, while Cologne and Eugene stayed behind to hear about Adam's correspondence with Newt. They didn't peek at Adam's letter. They just sat across from him, eager to hear what he had to say. Newt is such a pure soul, Adam said after reading the letter. The tone was surprisingly youthful, full of passion and love for magical creatures. Adam looked at Cologne and Eugene. The letter doesn't say much. Newt said he had a lot to talk about and was curious about the basilisk, so he's heading this way after settling his magical creatures. Judging by the timing, he should be on his way to Hogwarts now. Adam's timing was a little off. Newt's owl had been replaced a while ago, but it was still a bit old. In reality, Newt had arrived at Hogwarts before his owl, but he had gone to see Dumbledore first. As a result, it was a one-way trip. Professor Dumbledore, I really can't teach defense against the dark arts. I'm terrible at it, Newt said helplessly. I didn't even graduate from Hogwarts. Care of magical creatures, maybe. That would make more sense. Then care of magical creatures it is. Settled. Dumbledore was ready and waiting. He didn't want Newt teaching defense against the dark arts in the first place. He was over 90 years old, what if something happened? He was still stressed about finding a defense against the dark arts professor. And then Kettleburn resigned again, and he was overwhelmed. Newt showing up was a godsend. Newt opened his mouth. Wait, what was he going to say? But, I'm 95 years old. I don't have the energy to teach kids anymore. Doesn't matter. I can find you some assistants. There's no one in the world better qualified to teach care of magical creatures than you. Seeing that Newt still looked reluctant, Dumbledore sighed. Have you heard the legend about the defense against the dark arts curse? Last year's professor died, this year's turned himself in. And now the care of magical creatures professor has suddenly quit. I have to find 2 professors in less than 6 months. I'm under a lot of pressure. Help me out, Newt, just 1 year. At least give me time to find someone. If Newt still refused, Dumbledore wouldn't force him, but he'd have to let Hagrid take over. That wouldn't guarantee the quality of care of magical creatures education, but at least the professor would be good-hearted. Chapter 83 As long as your thinking does not slip, there are always more solutions than problems. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Finally, Newt caved and agreed to teach care of magical creatures for a semester, but he needed to prep. He'd have to bring along his magical creatures who couldn't be away from him for too long. And he needed to explain to his family, especially Tina, why he'd said he'd only be gone for a few days when he was now taking on a whole job. Thank you, Newt. I knew I could count on you. Dumbledore sighed with relief, then turned to Newt. So, what exactly brought you to Hogwarts this time? Newt looked down, avoiding eye contact, and Dumbledore chuckled, conjuring up a plate of candy. Newt braced himself for another pile of cockroach clusters, but instead, the plate was filled with candies he'd never seen before. Had Honeydukes released a new line? His kids were always buying candy there, but he'd never seen these particular ones. These are made by one of our students here at Hogwarts. He's quickly becoming known as our top baker and cook. He's a Hufflepuff, by the way. Dumbledore smiled. He's also someone I was hoping to arrange as an assistant for you. He loves magical creatures. I think you two would get along splendidly. Oh, Newt grinned, intrigued. A young student who's a great cook and loves magical creatures. What's his name? Adam Reed. Huh. Newt blinked. Are there two Adam Reeds at Hogwarts? Not that I'm aware of. Dumbledore paused, then looked at Newt knowingly. So, you were here this time because of... He found me through Nicholas Flamel's contacts and told me about the basilisk. You know. I have a soft spot for those little critters. Newt looked away, a bit sheepish, but cute. Dumbledore mentally reviewed everything he knew about basilisks, and a question mark popped into his head. That afternoon, Adam met Newt in the Care of Magical Creatures professor's office. Professor Scamander. Adam's greeting was a little louder than necessary, more like an exclamation, but hey, it was Newt Scamander. Hello, Adam. Newt, clearly used to such reactions, smiled shyly and nodded, then looked at Adam expectantly. So, where's the basilisk now? Right here. Adam pulled out the glass jar containing the basilisk, but didn't hand it over immediately. Even though it's been shrunk down and weakened, its fangs are still venomous, and its gaze is still deadly. Dumbledore, feeling ignored, couldn't help but glance at Adam, another question mark forming above his head. You didn't mention any of this when you wanted to show me the basilisk last time. Just to be safe, let me cast a protective charm on you first. It's what I used to block its attacks before. Adam cast a shield charm on Newt and then handed him the jar. Newt marveled at how helpful this charm would be for studying magical creatures, and he eagerly unscrewed the lid. Dumbledore. Wait, does nobody care about my well-being here? The basilisk had closed its eyes when it was removed from the jar. It just flicked its tail a bit, feeling itself being held, and then hissed a few times. Dumbledore's eyebrows shot up. He was already surprised that the basilisk understood human speech, but now he realized it was letting itself be caught in exchange for a meal. It must be one heck of a meal for it to sell its body like that. Pork knuckle, huh? What kind of spell did he cast? No problem. Adam nodded. Pork knuckle, huh? I'll whip one up tonight. Newt, despite his eagerness to observe the basilisk, knew his priorities. He was going to be a professor now, so there was no need to rush. After just a brief hold, he carefully put the basilisk back in its jar. Professor Scamander, is something wrong? Not at all. The basilisk can wait. I actually wanted to talk to you about something else. Newt glanced at Dumbledore, who was still sitting quietly in the background. At Professor Dumbledore's invitation, I'll be temporarily taking over as your Care of Magical Creatures professor next year. Really? Two voices shouted from just outside the door, cutting Newt off. We'll be going now. The voices quickly faded away. Ahem, that's my roommates. They're big fans of yours. Adam grinned sheepishly. Professor Scamander, you have no idea how popular you are with the Hufflepuffs. Your books are really well loved. Oh, well, I'm glad you enjoy my books, and me, I guess. Newt looked even more embarrassed, nodding awkwardly. Ahem. Dumbledore had had enough. You Hufflepuffs can have a fan meeting later, but can we get down to business first? Oh, right. Back to what we were talking about. Newt quickly got back on track, remembering what he had been doing. As you can see, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I don't have the energy to handle all 7-year groups. Adam immediately shot a disapproving look at Dumbledore. 5 years, and only elective students. Dumbledore corrected. Professor Scamander is over 90 years old. Adam countered. 5 years of elective students were still a huge responsibility, especially since Care of Magical Creatures was a class that needed to be more hands-on and involved. So, Professor Dumbledore suggested I have a few teaching assistants, and he suggested one of them be you. Newt looked at Adam and smiled. I heard you liked magical creatures. Would you be willing to help me out? Absolutely. I'm already taking care of magical creatures next year. Adam couldn't believe his luck. Not only was Newt teaching the course, but there was a chance to be his assistant. He quickly pulled out his course selection form from his bag. Dumbledore frowned when he saw the form. But you've already chosen 4 courses. That would mean Adam would have to use a time turner to keep up with everything, and he'd be exhausted. I can drop 2. Adam unhesitatingly changed the checkmarks behind arithmancy and ancient runes to crosses. Those time turners would probably get picked up by Voldemort and the Death Eaters when they blew up the Ministry of Magic in a few years. He couldn't afford to miss out on being Newt Scamander's teaching assistant. What? Voldemort might not even blow up the Ministry of Magic. Well, if he used his brain, there would always be a solution. If Voldemort was around, Adam would be ready. If not, well, could Adam create a Voldemort to fight? Chapter 84: A Sudden Impulse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Finally, Adam landed the gig as Newt's assistant and even recommended a few Hufflepuff seniors to him before heading out. Newt needed the help because he was a bit lacking in energy, and Adam figured every class should have an assistant anyway, right? Other professors might see it differently, but how could a Hufflepuff class pass up such a sweet opportunity? Adam's a real Hufflepuff through and through. Newt, seemingly energized by Adam's enthusiasm, chuckled and reached for the 4-fruit soup Adam had left him. He took a spoonful. He wasn't much for sweets these days, but Adam claimed his stuff wouldn't wreck his system, and besides, it tasted amazing. If you don't need anything else, I'll be on my way. Professor Dumbledore glanced at the bowl of soup in Newt's hand, his tone casual. It wasn't like he hadn't bought Adam's 4-fruit soup before, but Adam's shop only sold the original recipe: mung beans, koik seeds, lotus seeds, and red beans in honey water. Pure and simple, but the bowl Newt had was overflowing. Besides the 4 fruits, there was pudding, taro balls, tapioca pearls, white fungus, peach gum, grass jelly, peanuts, longan, watermelon, dragon fruit, cantaloupe. So much stuff it was practically spilling out of the honey water. Was it 4-fruit soup, or some kind of loaded dessert? And the bowl itself was practically a serving dish. Dumbledore's mouth watered. Oh, right, Professor Dumbledore, you go ahead. Newt nodded quickly. Dumbledore was being awfully polite, informing him, a professor who hadn't even started yet, of his departure. Dumbledore just stared. I'm practically begging here. Couldn't you offer me a bite? You're really going to eat that whole thing? Dumbledore hovered near the office door for almost a minute. Newt still didn't offer him anything, just looked up, puzzled. Dumbledore sighed and trudged out of the miserable office. Maybe I'll skip this place next year. Oblivious to Dumbledore's inner turmoil, Adam was riding high. Whoa! Can you believe we get to be Newt Scamander's students next year? Cologne bounced around the dorm, buzzing with excitement. Uther didn't seem to care much, but Eugene was wrestling with a dilemma. Should he swap ancient runes for care of magical creatures? With his track record, he might just end up needing to protect the creatures from him, but it was Newt Scamander. Adam couldn't solve Eugene's problem. If it were Hagrid's class, Eugene wouldn't hesitate, but Newt's care of magical creatures, who knew what kinds of creatures they'd encounter? The news that Newt Scamander would be teaching at Hogwarts for a year spread like wildfire among the Hufflepuffs. Just as Adam predicted, everyone was pumped, except for the first years and the graduating 7th years who were kicking themselves for missing out. The only calm first year, aside from the Muggleborns who had no clue who Newt was probably Rolf Scamander. He was even a little relieved. He loved his grandfather, but being his student might be a bit much. Fueled by this excitement, the Hufflepuff Quidditch team played with unusual ferocity against Gryffindor that weekend, but still lost in the end. Next year, the Hufflepuff team's seniors are moving on, which means 6 open spots. Anyone interested in joining? On the way back, Cedric caught up with Adam and his friends. So, you've decided to try out? Definitely, Cedric said with a determined grin. I'm aiming for the seeker position. I want to join the team too, Cologne's eyes lit up. I'm going for beater. Both of Hufflepuff's beaters are graduating. You were great in flying class freshman year, Adam said. Your chances are pretty good. What about the rest of you? Quidditch? Cedric asked the others. I'm thinking of trying out for keeper, Eugene said after a moment. Uther wasn't keen on Quidditch. Bernard was mildly interested, but the thought of all that boring training quickly turned him off. Okay, and you, Adam? Not really my thing. Cedric looked disappointed, but Adam just wasn't interested in flying around on a broomstick trying to catch a ball. He'd rather use magic. But I'll cheer you on, in a support role. That perked Cedric up. Awesome. With you behind us, we might actually take first place next year. Fingers crossed, Adam said, not getting his hopes up. Come to think of it, next year would be Cedric's first and last Quidditch match, according to the original timeline, and the Triwizard Tournament would be revived the year after. Adam frowned. Starting next year, Hogwarts would be increasingly influenced by outside forces, Dementors, Death Eaters, the Ministry of Magic. Suddenly, Adam thought of something. His arrival was probably a fluke, so the original storyline should still hold. True. But with Uther around, why would the Ministry of Magic dare to pull their stunts? Weren't they afraid of starting a diplomatic crisis? The thought burrowed into his mind, making him uneasy. Acting on impulse, Adam summoned the Clow cards when he got back to the dorm. What are you up to? Cologne asked, curious. Divination class is next year, just getting some practice in, Adam said casually. He closed his eyes and murmured, Clow cards created by Clow Reed, answer my questions and tell me. Adam paused. What happens to Uther Ramses in the next few years? Feeling a surge of magic, Adam flipped over the first card, a hint of what was to come. Disappear. Adam's pupils contracted. That didn't sound good. Uther disappeared. Would his parents whisk him back to Egypt to protect him from Hogwarts, or would he vanish from the world entirely, meeting some terrible end? Caro and Soupy, perched on the table, reached out and placed their paws on Adam's hand, as if to comfort him. Forcing a smile at the two, Adam looked at the row of Clow cards, his face grim. Chapter 85. The end of the year is approaching. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Taking a deep breath, Adam flipped over the 3 Clow cards in the center, which indicated the focus of the divination. Sand, scale, and hidden cards. Adam frowned. The sand card could mean Uther was returning to Egypt, but what about the scale and hidden cards? The situation seemed to be heading for the worst-case scenario. Adam turned over the last Clow card, divining the target's next move, miscellaneous card. Looking at the 5 face-up Clow cards, Adam was lost in thought. The last time he used the Clow cards, Adam had a decent understanding of Hogwarts and Dobby, making the interpretation smooth. This time, however, his lack of knowledge about Egypt and Uther was proving to be an obstacle. Ultimately, Adam decided to ask Uther directly. After dinner, Adam pulled Uther aside in an empty corridor. Uther, are you planning on going to any mazes or anything like that soon? Adam paused, then added, not necessarily immediately, but maybe within the next few years. Uther looked completely bewildered by the question. After a moment of thought, however, his expression shifted slightly, as if he'd just had a realization. He looked at Adam with surprise. Why do you ask? There was obviously no one around when he was talking to his father. Remember the divination I did in the dorm? Are you a prophet? Uther seemed even more shocked. The word prophet that Uther blurted out was in ancient Egyptian. Adam, having learned some ancient Egyptian from Nicholas Flamel's notes, nodded without missing a beat. Uther's expression became even more complicated, realizing Adam understood him, but now wasn't the time to ask when Adam learned ancient Egyptian. Yes, I'm going to a maze-like place when I go home for the holidays. Why? Realizing Uther was hesitant to reveal too much, Adam didn't press for details, but simply told him the results of his divination, leaving out his own interpretation. Uther might find it easier to interpret the symbols on the Clow cards himself. Adam's lack of knowledge could potentially mislead him. The cards that came up for me were ones representing disappearance, gravel, scales, and darkness. Uther narrowed his eyes, deep in thought. After a long pause, he looked up at Adam. "Thank you. This divination is very helpful. Glad I could help. It was just a hunch, really." Adam shrugged and patted Uther on the shoulder. "Be safe." He paused, then added, "Just to be on the safe side, maybe prepare an escape route, like a port key." "A port key. Okay, I'll remember that." Uther nodded. After that day, Adam didn't bring it up again. As time went on, the end-of-year exams quietly approached. "Oh man, this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts review is the most exhausting thing I've ever done," Cedric groaned, lying face down on the table. He'd never spent this much time studying defense against the dark arts, he couldn't help it. With his OWLS coming up, the pressure was even greater for him. 4 different professors had shared the teaching and published papers together, which meant 4 different versions of what might be on the exam, with less than 15% overlap. Look on the bright side, it's the highest quality defense against the dark arts instruction we've had all year. Try this Tai Chi smoothie. Considering everyone's stress and his own lack of inspiration, Adam served a simple, refreshing ice cream, treating it as an afternoon tea. He dug a spoonful into the middle of the black and white smoothie. The mix of brown sugar and milk mint tasted sweet and refreshing, instantly dispelling the boredom caused by the hot weather and tedious studying. After several mouthfuls, Cedric let out a long breath and collapsed onto the sofa. "Ah! That's the stuff. I'm alive again. This has condensed milk in it." Cologne exclaimed after tasting the white fish eyes on the brown sugar smoothie. He dug out a spoonful of the black fish eyes. These were brown sugar boba, no doubt. "Merlin help us, next year's Defense Against the Dark Arts professor probably won't show up until the end of the semester, just like poor Professor Quirrell," Fred and George said, making a mock sign of the cross on their chests. Cedric's current state had spooked the twins. If next year's Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher also failed to make it through the year, they'd be in a world of hurt. At first, everyone had been happy to get rid of Lockhart, but it wasn't until the end-of-year exams that they realized Lockhart actually had some advantages. At least the questions from an idiot weren't too hard. Even Adam couldn't help but wonder if he'd been too hasty. Maybe it would have been better to keep the Basilisk and Lockhart around, using the creation card to keep them under control. He vaguely recalled that things hadn't been this bad. "We can't change the past, but we can plan for the future." Adam started thinking about next year's Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Who would it be? Next year's big thing would be Dementors. Oh, right, the professor would be Lupin, probably the only one in the original books who left the position on his own terms. Even though his werewolf identity was revealed, at least he left Hogwarts in one piece. Although he did eventually die at Hogwarts, it was hard to say if that was a result of the curse. Next year's Dementors, Adam frowned. He knew the Patronus charm and wasn't afraid of them, but he'd probably need to stock up on a lot of chocolate next year. He also hoped that Newt wouldn't be too affected by them. He remembered that Newt also knew the Patronus charm and had known it for a long time. His Patronus was a Kelpie. The main problem was the Ministry of Magic. Even if Adam found Peter Pettigrew in advance, they probably wouldn't admit it. Otherwise, 3rd year would be easy to fix. "Adam, what's wrong?" Eugene asked, looking at him with concern. "It's nothing. Just thinking about some annoying stuff. Some people were like toads clinging to your feet. They don't bite, but they're still disgusting." "Huh. Adam actually gets annoyed during review month?" Cologne acted like he'd just heard some earth-shattering news. "Adam shouldn't get annoyed about studying," Bernard said, looking at Adam. Adam smiled and shook his head to show he was okay. Bernard shrugged. "Well, if anything's up, you can always tell us." Chapter 86, The Proud Hufflepuff. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I've decided to head home after the last Quidditch match. Eugene was sprawled on his bed after the exam, stretching out like a cat. "Huh. It's not like you to be so eager to get back." "Well. Grandma mentioned that her parents got a letter saying they'd be home this holiday," Eugene said, staring up at the canopy of his four-poster bed. Even though he acted like he didn't need his parents, Eugene couldn't help but have some hope. This would probably be the first time he actually remembered meeting them. Adam nodded in understanding. Speaking of the last Quidditch match, neither team seemed all that into it. Uther chimed in, trying to lighten the mood. Bernard couldn't help but smirk. Yeah, it's not like it matters who wins or loses. We've already locked up the House Cup. The House Cup score mostly came down to two things: points awarded or deducted for general behavior, and the 100-point bonus for winning the Quidditch Cup. Usually, it's hard to get more than a 100-point lead, so Quidditch is a big deal, but that's usually. This year was different. Adam's 250 points for Hufflepuff created a massive gap between Hufflepuff's score and everyone else's. That's why the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams weren't as fired up as usual during the final Quidditch match. On a sunny afternoon, the Slytherin team started off with some blatant fouls, nearly knocking Fred Weasley off his broom. They racked up 40 points. Madame Hooch's silver whistle was shrieking so loud it almost burst before she got things under control, but the Slytherins had an early lead, and with Fred injured, they managed to build a 120-point advantage in less than an hour. Ultimately, Harry caught the golden snitch right in front of Draco with a risky maneuver just before Slytherin could hit 150 points. Draco was furious. Even at the end of your dinner, you could still see Marcus Flint chewing out Malfoy. It was Marcus's last Quidditch match, which is why Slytherin played so recklessly. Alright, settle down everyone. Professor Dumbledore walked to the podium, and the Great Hall immediately quieted down. Another year has passed, and I'm happy to see how much you've all grown. You've probably learned a lot and forgotten some things from the past year. But today, I need to bring up a few things. Professor Dumbledore looked towards Adam with a smile. This year, Adam Reed solved the mystery of the monster in the Chamber of Secrets and protected everyone at Hogwarts. The only victim, Mr. Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, has made a full recovery thanks to the hard work of Professor Sprout and Professor Snape. Professor Dumbledore gestured towards Filch, who was leaning against the wall, holding Mrs. Norris and actually smiling. Therefore, as you all know, Hufflepuff has received a considerable number of house points. The Great Hall erupted in applause, especially at the Hufflepuff table, where everyone cheered and looked at Adam. So, the House Cup goes to Hufflepuff this year, without a doubt. Before we enjoy this delicious food, there's one more thing we need to do. Professor Dumbledore raised his hand towards the ceiling, and the Gryffindor and Slytherin banners were replaced with Hufflepuff's copper and yellow. The Hufflepuff table cheered even louder. Cedric, taking advantage of his height, reached across the long table and clapped Adam on the shoulder, shaking him. If they weren't in the Great Hall, Adam was pretty sure the excited Badgers would have tossed him in the air. Now, enjoy the feast. With Professor Dumbledore's last words, the end-of-year dinner officially began, and the Hufflepuffs were finally ready to party. It had been years since they won the House Cup. The older students never even talked about it. Hufflepuff was finally having their moment. Some of the younger Hufflepuffs even wrote excited letters home that night to tell their parents the good news. The celebratory atmosphere lasted until the day the exam results were handed out, at which point it died down a little. Wow! I got an O in defense against the dark arts. I didn't think the professors would grade so easily. I was hoping for an A at best. Cologne looked at his transcript in disbelief. Well, the exam probably highlighted how poorly defense against the dark arts has been taught in previous years, and the professors were in a tough spot. They couldn't exactly test only what was taught this year. The problem was with all the professors who resigned or died in the past, there wasn't anyone to blame. With all the failing grades, what else could the professors do but lower the grading standards? So, it wasn't a shock that Cologne, who studied his butt off, got an O. Ah, Adam still got straight O's. Cologne walked over and looked at Adam's transcript and sighed. Adam's like a robot, he can do everything. Studying, cooking, having fun. There's no point in comparing yourself to him. Bernard had just accepted Adam's natural talents. What's a robot? It's like an alchemical construct that does exactly what it's programmed to do. Bernard's explanation seemed to satisfy Cologne, on the train home, the Hufflepuffs were all huddled around Adam. This year will definitely go down in Hufflepuff history. Adam, you're going to be a Hufflepuff legend, Vivian said cheerfully. I think Adam already is. His cooking alone is enough to make him a legend. Bruce said with a sigh, before taking a small bite of an egg tart. He wouldn't be able to get Adam's food for the entire holiday. Luckily, he was smart enough to buy a bunch of Adam's candies and cakes in advance. It should last him a month, if his parents and siblings didn't steal them all. You guys are too kind. Adam, who had been getting complimented for a week, shook his head. Anyone want some brown sugar milk tea? Me. XN, after finally getting off the train and saying goodbye to everyone, Adam found his grandparents waiting for him. Looks like Adam's pretty popular with his classmates. Old Reed looked proud. Grandpa was popular with his classmates, too. Adam, don't learn Grandpa's habit of fighting in school. Emma's comment made Old Reed freeze. Emma didn't care, and took Adam's hand, heading toward platform 93/4. After crossing the platform, Adam saw his parents waiting for him as expected. Oh, I told you guys not to pick me up. You're both so busy. We're not too busy to pick up our son after not seeing him for a year. After hugging his mom and dad, Adam got into the car to go home. Adam was wondering if his dad was going to be his usual self, when his mom looked back at Adam from the passenger seat. Adam, your grandparents want you to visit China this holiday. What do you think? Chapter 87. As expected, an accident happened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Grandpa and Grandma. Adam paused, lost in thought, because of the distance, the situation in China, and the secrecy. His memories of his grandparents were faint. He remembered them only from the day he got his acceptance letter. That was the only time they met. He was so young then, 2 or 3 years old, that he barely remembered anything, not even his mom's pregnancy. So, strangers might be a hurtful word, but it was probably the best way to describe his relationship with them. Great. I've always wanted to visit China and try real Chinese food, Mtlnovel said, relieved. She smiled and nodded. I'll book a flight right now and go back with you. Flights were packed because of the holidays, and Mtlnovel needed time to prepare for her return, so they booked a flight for 10 days later. But on the 8th day, Adam got a letter delivered by an owl. At first, he didn't think anything of it. He was just curious because he'd never seen this particular owl before. He thought he knew all the owls that delivered his mail. After checking for curses, he opened the letter. The smile on his face vanished. Adam, if you're reading this, it probably means something bad happened to me. That was the first sentence. The handwriting was definitely Uther's. The forced lightheartedness didn't make Adam feel any better. He kept reading. Because of your prophecy, I made some preparations. I'm writing this as a backup. If things go well, I'll be out of Hamiputra in 7 days using a port key, so this letter won't be sent. But if you're reading this. The writing got shaky, like the quill had paused for a while. Uther started a new line. I've thought a lot about why I'm writing this to you and what you can do if you get this. We've been roommates for 2 years, and we're pretty good friends, so please tell my mom. She probably doesn't know anything happened. At least she can be prepared. And say goodbye to my brothers when school starts. I probably can't repay you for this. You don't seem to need money. But my collection is in the box under my bed. You can have it as a souvenir. They're all pretty rare. Finally, you're a great roommate, and your cooking is awesome. Love ya, Adam. Adam put down the letter, blinked his watery eyes, and took a deep breath. What's wrong, Adam? Xiaoka asked, tilting her head. Adam's face was pale. Xiaoku, hold on, let me think. He needed to figure out if Uther was dead. If he wasn't, Adam could rescue him by going to Egypt. But if he was dead, Adam's trip would close the loop, and even time magic wouldn't change it. But how could he know if Uther was dead without going? Wait, there was a way. Clow cards, created by Clow Reed, answer my questions and tell me about Uther Ramses. With his limited divination skills, even if the card said Uther was dead, it would just be a guess. Good thing there weren't any death cards in the deck. Erase, Sand, Libra, Conceal, Mystery. Seeing the same result as last time, Adam sighed with relief. If nothing had changed, did that mean Uther was still alive? Adam packed up the cards, summoned the Staff of Darkness, and prepared to use the card-moving magic to go to Egypt. He was glad he'd learned that spell. Otherwise, he couldn't sustain the magic over that distance. Shao Ku, see bye, I have to leave for a while. Wait, Adam. Don't you remember you're going to China in 2 days? See bye interrupted. He'd forgotten all about it. Adam hurried to find Ms. Lee. Mom, something happened to my classmate in Egypt. I have to go find him. I can't go to China with you. What? Ms. Lee's smile faded. But your grandparents. I'm sorry, Mom, it's an emergency. A matter of life and death. China can wait. We haven't seen them in years. What's another year? Adam took Ms. Lee's hand. He loved China, but he was also grateful to his grandparents. They had given him the sealed book. As for family ties, he had some, but not much. Saving Uther's life was more important than meeting unknown relatives. All right. Ms. Lee sighed. We'll go next year. I'll buy you a ticket to Egypt. Too late. I'll use magic. Thanks for understanding. After hugging Ms. Lee and kissing her cheek, Adam waved the Staff of Darkness and disappeared. He landed at the Uther family's villa and immediately heard shouts in Arabic. Who? 5 wizards pointed their wands at him. The chains they conjured were blocked by his protective magic. I'm looking for Uther, Adam said in ancient Egyptian, confusing the wizards. Adam? Footsteps came from upstairs. It was Uther's mother, Tuya. She'd heard the commotion. Aunt. Adam began, but he saw Tuya's red eyes. I know. Tuya pulled out a letter, her fingers shaking. She took a few breaths to calm herself. I didn't expect you so soon, come with me. The wizards retreated at Tuya's signal. Adam followed her upstairs. This is Uther's room. Please, go in. Adam wanted to save Uther now, but it seemed too rushed. Tuya wouldn't believe he could do it. But if he waited, Uther might die. He opened the door and walked in. As soon as he did, Adam wanted to slam it shut and erase the memory. He wished he hadn't opened it. Uther, prepared the port key before going, Tuya said, walking past Adam. Her voice trembled. Marion activated it yesterday, but all that came back was his body, and... Chapter 88 Hidden Clues. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uncle's dead? Yeah. He triggered the door key, but all that teleported back was his body. And Uther, in that state, came back too. Tuya held Uther's hand, shaking her head, unable to say another word. Adam gripped the dark staff, trying to steady himself, and finally forced his legs to move forward. Uther lay on the bed, eyes closed, just like in their old dorm days, but now, his chest was bare, and a huge hole gaped where his heart should have been. In its place was an emerald scarab. Uther was back, but his heart wasn't. The only thing keeping Adam calm was the fact that Uther, even without a heart, wasn't dead. What did they run into? I don't know. Tuya wiped away her tears. Marion just said he'd found something, then took Uther and the priests into the desert. They did that kind of thing all the time, so I didn't think much of it. So, do you know where they went? I think it was Hamyonaptra. Tuya recalled. Marion and I explored there plenty of times, so it didn't seem like a big deal this time. She'd led expeditions there with the priests before, and this time Marion took his son. The place had been searched so many times. It just seemed like a routine trip, but then this happened. Adam nodded. What's the situation at the Ministry of Magic? Don't worry about that, it's fine. Tuya remembered the letter she'd received that morning, a fresh wave of sadness washing over her. but a warmth blooming in her heart. "Thanks for coming. How did you get here so fast?" It had been less than an hour between the letter's arrival and Adam's appearance. Even by taking a direct route from the ministry, he shouldn't have made it so quickly. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about next." Adam explained his magic-fueled trip to Egypt and his plan to save Uther, and just as he expected, she shut him down. "I can't let you. It's too dangerous." Tuya was firm. "I appreciate you wanting to help Uther, Adam, but he's already. I can feel that Uther's not dead yet. If we can figure out why he's like this, he can still be saved." Adam's intensity caught Tuya off guard, and she sighed. "If there's a chance, of course I want to save him. Okay, I'll do what I can." But when he saw the help she was offering, Adam fell silent. "Hamyonaptra has been combed over countless times. I've led expeditions there at least 20 times. We've checked every single place you can enter. They must have stumbled on something new this time." Tuya stared at the 4 towering stacks of papyrus in front of her, looking defeated. "This is everything Marion was researching before he left. I need to find that new discovery in here, figure out what kind of trouble Uther and the others ran into, and how things got so bad. The amulet will only protect Uther for 1 day. There's less than half a day left, and I've only gotten through a quarter of this. Can't you get someone else to help? Besides Marion and me, the only ones who know Hamyonaptra are the priests who haven't come back." Tuya shook her head. "I don't care if other people look at this stuff, but they won't know what's already been found and what's new. You take your time. I should be able to extend the protection around Uther a little longer." Adam returned to Uther's room and cast a protective spell, a shield strong enough to stop time itself. It should be enough to ward off whatever threat remained. "You better hang in there, kid, until I can rescue you." Sitting on the bed, Adam took Uther's hand. It was still warm, which eased the sting of seeing his chest torn open. "If you want to say goodbye to Bernard and the others, go yourself. Who cares about your pile of junk? If you want money, I can be rich enough to rival a country in a minute, huh?" Then, Adam realized that Uther's plans seemed to be constantly changing. For example, when he wrote the letter to Adam, he wasn't planning to write to his mother, but he wrote to Tuya after returning to Egypt. So, after he returned to Egypt, before he really left, would he leave clues that he had not decided to leave when he wrote to Adam? If so, where would he leave them? Of course, it was where he left the letter for Adam to see. He quickly bent down and dragged a box out from under Uther's bed. The lid was emblazoned with the Eye of Horus. Adam flipped it open without hesitation and found a folded sheet of papyrus inside. "Is this a map?" He should be thankful that the clue Uther left for him was not a riddle or motto that needed to be deciphered. Adam rushed the papyrus to Tuya, who instantly recognized it as a map of the underground levels of Hamyonaptra, with a previously unknown passage marked on it. "Where did you find this?" "In the box Uther mentioned in the letter he gave me." Tuya looked at the map her son left behind, then glanced at her husband's towering piles of research, and wiped away tears. "That bastard isn't as reliable as my son. Let's go." "Let me go alone, Auntie. Tell me the way to Hamyonaptra. I can't leave you here right now." Hearing Adam's words, Tuya instinctively wanted to refuse, but looking at the map she fell silent. "Since Uther chose to leave the clue to you instead of me, then. Perhaps in her son's heart, if he really got into trouble, Adam would be the one who was more likely to save him." Tuya sighed. Her husband died suddenly, and she really couldn't leave this place. "Be careful." Finding a map near Egypt, Tuya drew a circle on it. "Hamyonaptra has been hidden using magic that prevents you from mapping it. Go to this location on the map. There's a patch of quicksand there. If you get swallowed, it will send you to Hamyonaptra. But you need to find a way to survive in the quicksand first." Tuya searched Adam's eyes. If she saw any hesitation or fear, she would hold back the rest of the information, and make him go back. If he couldn't even handle the quicksand, sending him to save Uther was a suicide mission, but Adam's eyes were full of confidence, both relieving and worrying. "Then what?" Then, taking a deep breath, Tuya steeled herself and outlined the dangers he'd face reaching the passage, and Adam wrote them all down. Before he left, Tuya squeezed Adam's hand. "Whether you can save Uther or not, promise me you'll look after yourself. Even if Uther wouldn't want to see you in the underworld with him. Don't worry, Auntie, I'll bring Uther back." Egypt had to be a powder keg right now. To avoid drawing attention, Adam used a cloaking charm to mask his appearance before leaving Uther's house. He spotted several shadowy figures lurking around the property, perhaps protecting him in secret, perhaps waiting for an opportunity. It didn't matter to Adam. If Marion was a pharaoh in the past, then Tuya was his high priest. Adam knew that Tuya could easily handle these problems. Chapter 89 Anubis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first step. Get swallowed by quicksand. Adam located the quicksand pit Tuya had mentioned and sank into it without a fight. Wrapped in protective magic, he floated in a gritty mess for about half an hour before feeling the ground disappear beneath him. A magic circle flashed in the emptiness, and silver-white wings, reminiscent of an animagus's fur, burst open. They flapped a couple of times, steadying him in the air. Fluorescent orbs bloomed from Adam's hands, illuminating a lightless underground palace. Stone tablets, etched with symbols praising the gods, lined the walls. A towering statue of Anubis stood at the far end. Looking up, Adam saw that flowing yellow sand was held back by an invisible barrier above. This was the ground floor of Hamunaptra. In the old days, Egyptians worshipped the gods of the underworld here, awed by death. But now, it was forgotten. The once solemn and majestic structure was nothing more than buried ruins swallowed by the sand. The second step. Activate the mechanism. Landing in front of the Anubis statue, Adam folded his wings and located the trigger Tuya had described. He activated it, and Anubis slowly rotated half a circle on its base, revealing a staircase leading down. Adam descended. After a minute or so, a light appeared below. In its glow, he spotted a stone door and an enormous monster. Step 3, get past the Sphinx guarding the gate. The pole resting on the ground was nearly as tall as Adam. This Sphinx was easily the size of the statue next to the pyramids. It was far closer to what Adam imagined Anubis to be than Uther's fur ball. Thinking of Uther's creature, the corner of Adam's mouth twitched. He gripped the Staff of Darkness in one hand and summoned a cloud card picturing a fish with the other. Answer my riddle, what? Seal lifted. In the blink of an eye, the towering Sphinx was encased in ice. The next moment, it shattered into a million ice crystals. This Sphinx wasn't a true magical creature, but a golem created with ancient magic. Its weakness was extreme cold. Even if destroyed, it would reappear after a few days. Adam felt no guilt about taking care of it for Uther. The fourth step. Avoid the magical creatures along the way and find the passage. He pushed open the giant door and continued forward. The passage Uther's map indicated was in the southwest corner. He might encounter magical creatures like Niven snakes and manticores along the way, but Adam wasn't worried in the slightest. Raise a snake for a rainy day. Adam twisted open a glass jar and released a basilisk, removing the shrinking charm. Do, go ahead and clear the way. Hiss. The basilisk shifted its weight, glanced at Adam, hissed a message, and lumbered off in the direction Adam pointed. No need to ask why. Do had gotten a taste of Adam's basilisk soup, and it watched him roast basilisk eyeballs, with a steady supply of food on one side and the threat of becoming stew on the other. The basilisk, now called Do, knew which side his bread was buttered on, and it respected strength. The basilisk's scales scraped against the gravel floor, sending similar sounds rippling outward, but all moved away from Adam. The power of the King of Serpents was enough to scare off those things. As for the pack of manticores scurrying towards Adam, their eye structures were similar to spiders, and they died instantly after encountering the basilisk. The ground was soon littered with their corpses. The journey was smooth. Adam walked in the path crushed by the basilisk, the manticore shells crunching under his feet. Normally, he might have wondered how to cook them or even raise a few, but he was in no mood. Finally reaching the passage indicated on the map, Adam examined the hieroglyphics on the wall in front of him. The last step, Uther marked the Eye of Horus on the map, but he didn't write down how to activate it. Adam studied the 3 eyes of Horus on the wall but saw nothing unusual. He reached out and touched them one by one. That there was a bulge on the last eye of Horus. But it looked normal. Adam tried to press it, but nothing happened. He pressed harder. Rumble. The wall cracked along the lines of the hieroglyphics and slowly sunk into the wall on both sides, revealing a dark passageway. The orb of light floated into the passageway, and Adam could see new hieroglyphics on the wall at the entrance. The general idea was, the underworld lay ahead. Any living person who entered would never return to the world again. The underworld. Dismissing Mo-Do, Adam traced the sacred script symbolizing the underworld with his fingers and resolutely stepped into the passage, gripping the staff of darkness. Boom! As soon as he stepped into the passageway, Adam heard the sound of a mechanism engaging behind him. The walls that had slid into recesses were about to close again. Adam quickly took out a candy cane and shoved it forward. Caw. The candy cane, enhanced with protective magic, was indestructible. It wedged firmly between the closing walls. Then, using powerful magic, he forced the walls back, securing an escape route. Adam moved forward and spotted a length of linen hanging down from above at the end of the tunnel. Adam remembered that Uther had mentioned this mechanism when they came to Egypt last time. Behind the false door of the pyramid, anyone except the descendants of the pharaoh who passed through this thing would fall into the underworld, never to return. It felt a bit like the curtain in the death chamber of the British Ministry of Magic. Adam used the staff of darkness to pick up the linen and walked right through it. The protective magic surrounding him activated immediately, and Adam could clearly feel the changes in the surrounding environment. Is this the underworld? Strictly speaking, this is not the underworld, but the place of judgment, the border between life and death, the realm ruled by the god Anubis. The unexpected voice didn't startle Adam. He nodded in a daze. Fondue City, Misty Mountains, Erebus. In an instant, the border between life and death seemed to transform from the kingdom of God ruled by Anubis into a group of gods crammed into a rented house. The voice in the darkness was silent for a moment, then continued as if nothing had happened. Come forward, mortal who has entered the underworld, and accept the test of judgment. Adam's eyes grew cold, and he gripped the staff of darkness tightly as he continued forward. He reached the end of the passage. Beyond the doorway lay a circular platform, surrounded by an immense space with no visible boundaries. At the center of the platform stood a golden scale, perfectly balanced at the moment. The left side was empty, and an ostrich feather rested on the right. Mortal who has entered the underworld. A huge jackal head emerged from the darkness, and it spoke in a measured voice. I am Anubis. Surrender your heart, and I shall judge whether you may proceed. As the jackal head claiming to be Anubis finished speaking, Adam's protective magic was triggered, but nothing else happened. The moment hung awkwardly in the air. Did you try to take someone else's heart for judgment a few days ago? Adam asked Anubis, raising his voice. Ah, the rule breaker. Anubis frowned at Adam, whose heart hadn't been taken, but didn't refuse to answer. Geb's protection cannot shield him forever. His soul will ultimately fall into the lake of fire and be devoured by Amit, like the other who broke the rules. His death is close. That hit a nerve. How can I get his heart and soul back? The blasphemer will be damned in hell forever. Adam took a deep breath and slowly raised the staff of darkness. Chapter 90 Loopholes in the Rules. You are listening at novelfold.audio. Big shot. Power move. Fight. Adam, juiced up with Clow card buffs, snatched the dark staff and charged. Hey! What do you think you're doing? I'm Anubis. Ow, my face. Anubis, huh? Stop. You blasphemer. You're going straight to hell. My eyes. Blasphemer, huh? Going to hell, huh? Ouch. Hold on. Just give me a sec. I'll bite you. Bite me, will you? What's that? No, don't, ah. Ah. Trying to play me for a fool, huh? Think changing your voice will hide the fact that you were the one telling me to go forward? Looks like you need a good beating to communicate normally. Adam cracked his knuckles. Ready to talk? Or do I need to jog your memory on how to talk to people? Wah. This is just an artifact that God Anubis left behind. I'm just following procedure. Those two broke the rules. It's not my fault. QAQ. The jackal head, magically grown to Adam's size, covered his swollen face and body. He huddled in the corner of the platform, crying and sputtering through missing teeth. Tears streamed from his puffy eyes. Rules? What rules? Adam frowned, glancing at the scale. You're saying Uther can't pass Anubis trial? That's impossible. The scale of Anubis judges if someone did more good or bad in their life, not if they were a saint. Uther's dad was no angel. How could Uther, Mr. Hufflepuff himself, fail? What kind of messed up trial is this? How should I know? He just didn't pass. Then some other dude used Gaboo's amulet to block the judgment and teleported him away. So, the rules snatched his soul. Adam replayed the scene in his head. Uther and his dad showed up. They decided Uther would take the trial. Uther failed. Then, Dad swapped Uther's heart with the scarab, activated the port key, and messed up the whole trial. Now Uther's soul is gone. According to the myth, Uther was the most likely to pass the trial. There are still some questions, like what happened to the priests, but that's not important now. Where are the heart and soul now? Well, both souls are in the lake of fire cage down below. The heart is protected by a cloth-covered talisman. I've got it. The jackal head answered truthfully. Uther's soul is here too. Give me the heart. What? Seeing Adam heft the staff of darkness again, the jackal head felt a wave of pain. Real or imagined, it didn't matter. He quickly handed over the heart with the sealed soul. But listen, this heart is still bound by Anubis rules. Even if you get it back, it won't work. When Gabe's amulet wears off, his soul is done for. Ahem, he'll still die. Taking the heart, Adam felt a jolt, a sympathetic throb. How do I break Anubis' hold on him? The trial is over. Unless you can find the god Osiris or R.A. Whoops. I remember. The trial was interrupted. It's not over yet. I'll think of something. Let me think. The jackal head clung to Adam's leg, tripping over his words. He glanced at the dark staff and the look in the kid's eyes. If his answer didn't satisfy the kid, that spike was going into his eye, no question. The jackal head's brain worked faster than it had in centuries. Wait. There's a way. Spit it out. God Anubis laid out rules for the scales, but he didn't micromanage every single step. There are loopholes. Anubis used to run the trial himself, so he didn't need a rulebook. But then Anubis vanished, leaving these rules behind. The jackal head had never even met the god. The rules had never been truly tested. Of course, there were holes. The jackal head felt a divine blessing. A brilliant plan formed in his mind. Only a heart or the feather of truth can be placed on the scale. To pass, the weights must be equal, or the heart lighter than the feather. So, if we put hearts on both sides, and they weigh the same, both hearts pass. Thank God Thoth. Thank God Anubis. Before the jackal head could celebrate his genius, he saw the kid's eyes fixed on his chest. Jackal head? Wait a minute. My heart can't weigh as much as his. We'll just cut off the extra bits. Jackal head. He wanted to say, hold on. Maybe there was another way. But there were only 3 hearts here. One that needed saving, the kid's, and his. No need to guess which would be used for balancing. His brain raced. He might still be able to save himself. Wait. The lake of fire cage. Adam remembered the jackal head saying Uther's dad's soul was down there. Hopefully, mummification wasn't too quick. Maybe he could still be rescued. Exactly. Amit needs Anubis' permission to devour souls and hearts. But Anubis seems to have forgotten about them and left no instructions. So, the souls that should have been devoured are just locked up in the lake of fire. That the jackal head was on a roll. Faced with death, colleagues were nothing. They can't devour souls or hearts anyway. And there are too many of them. They don't need that many guards. Losing one won't matter. But I'm unique. If I die, who's going to replace me? The whole underworld will fall apart. Adam frowned. Why haven't any new souls arrived lately? Has no one died in Egypt? Something didn't add up. If this was the real underworld, thoughts flashed through his mind, but he suppressed them. Take me to the lake of fire cage.